So this is kind of like a remake, remade, re-upload, build, or yeah. The thing is that this video got taken down because of a copyright, because of the initial meme that I had for this video. Hopefully, it was just a sound, dude. Hopefully nothing will happen to this one. But it was a good thing, because at the end of the day, I did have enough time to refine it. This is my main build. I have lots of builds, but this is my main one. This is my favorite. This is the one that I mostly use for farming the endgame and for farming the rest of my builds, because of how easy and how fast it is to actually do things with this build. Now, as you can see, it deals tremendous amounts of damage. This is a build that's going to be depending on certain situations and certain variables that you are going to be facing. Because, for example, sometimes you are going to be fighting while this build is going to be focused on one-shotting things, killing things before you actually run out of your living artifact. Sometimes that's not going to be the case, because sometimes you have bosses that have two phases, or sometimes you have bosses that there's a boss after a boss, and you have to be able to deal with those situations as well, alongside with the bosses that you're basically going to be able to one-shot. And the preparation and the setup for this build, it's going to be depending on those situations. As for exploration, it's also going to be amazing, because as you can see here, you're basically going to be one-shotting every single thing out there. All of the footage, because of the stuff that you see me gathering from the ground, all of this is from the endgame. So yeah, it's a very powerful build. And thankfully enough, I managed to refine it. A lot of the main things, core things, are still here. Let's talk about the armor sets first. And we're using the Grace of Inari in here. We're also using the 3 pieces of the Fist of the Four Guardians, and then 3 pieces of the Warrior of the East. The Warrior of the East gives us martial arts damage and then damage taken. You can take away the damage taken if you don't think that's necessary. Ideally, we just want the martial arts damage. As a matter of fact, the whole thing about this is stacking as much martial arts damage as we can possibly do. The First of the Four Guardians is going to give us a flipping 15.1% martial arts damage. Just with these two guys right in here, we already have a 23% martial arts damage, 23.3% martial arts damage. We're going to be raising that up with different things. I was lucky enough, this is something that you might be able to do, something that you might not be able to do. I was lucky enough that my weapon, when I was farming, I got the Ornamental Blade. The Ornamental Blade has martial arts damage, but also this is the Grace of Inari. What the Grace of Inari is going to do is that it's going to give your elemental weapon damage a whopping 28%. So with the gameplay that you can see here, you will see that the main damage that we're dealing, we can deal up to 50k damage, because we have the base damage, the base single blow, but also the elemental damage that our living artifact deals. And in the gameplay that you see me for the exploration, you also see me using an elemental weapon, because ideally when we're not buffing a character and we're doing exploration, you can be using your elemental weapon to furthermore enhance your actual melee damage, but talk about that when we talk about the stats. And yeah, this is a very endgame build, because for this you're going to be needing a Grace of Inari, Yasakani, Magatama, for you to be able to get the Fist of the Four Guardians and then the Warrior of the East. You're just going to be needing 2 pieces here. The rest of everything is going to be going into Inari. And ideally, things that you should want to get into your accessories, anything that gives you melee damage or martial arts damage or things like that, that's ideally what you want to be looking for, just so it happens with my weapon here. And as for the armor bonuses that you're going to add into the armor, the affixes and suffixes, ideally just take damage, damage taken, defense, as many of these guys as you can get, because while exploration, what's going to happen is that you're going to be receiving lots of damage, but you're going to be getting it back because every time that you kill something, ideally on the end game, on New Game Plus, they're always going to be dropping you elixirs. So it's a game of back and forth, and back and forth. So while exploration, you do want to have a little bit more of defense, and when we're fighting something that it has two faces, we'll talk about this in a little while, but ideally you do also want to have some kind of defense so that you can withstand it. Stats are interesting. We're using the main stats to scale our weapon. We're remodeling our weapon to scale out of magic, intellect, and strength here. And the reason for that being is very simple. Ideally, if you want to make a pure melee build on the endgame, once you have managed to bypass everything, you can ideally place the 99 points into magic, 99 points into intellect, so that you can scale your damage out of this. But also magic, the more magic that you get, the more elemental damage that you're going to be receiving from applying an elemental to your weapon. That's also going to be furthermore enhanced by the Natis's Armorset. So ideally on the end game, you want to have something that your base damage is already scaled, but then you're adding something on top of that, which is going to make you that much deadlier. The rest of everything, intellect is going to furthermore enhance the duration of the item effects that we're using, the effect duration for everything that we're using. That is the debuffs. Just have a couple of debuffs, but also we're buffing our character to the death, so we really need the intellect. This should be the second most important stat for you. The rest of everything is just requirement. Constitution is requirement, armor requirement, stamina is going to be requirement for us to be able to fast to medium roll, and then the strength is just the that's my level. Like this, I'm just dumping points in here to furthermore enhance the scaling of my weapon. You can change this to whichever that you want, but also have in mind that because we're using some Grace of Inari, your armor sets might have different stat requirements, so this might look a little different than mine. From skill management, there's only just a couple of things that I say that are important for this build to work properly. Mainly, we need the amplification to increase the duration of our Omnyo magic item effects so that we can buff our characters that much more. Awakening. I like to buff myself fast. I don't want to be wasting any of those precious seconds when like there's some talismans that we're using here that they run real fast, so we want to get those one shots as fast as we can possibly do. And then finally, the most important part of this build is going to be the artifact defense. What this does is that it turns you into God mode. The enemy cannot touch you, the enemy cannot do anything to you, the enemy will not interrupt your attacks nor anything at all. The only downside is that it's going to reduce in half the duration of the living artifact. Although we really don't care that much about that, because ideally we want to be one-shotting things before anything happens. Now, for Samurai, I'd say that there's a couple of things that I would want to be using if it was possible, but ideally just increase your martial arts damage. I'd say that Destructive Arts is a must because it increases by 10% the amount of elemental damage. The status element, we don't really care that much while we're using the strong attacks and the martial arts, while the martial arts proficiency is active. So for us to be able to get the proficiency active, it's kind of like, it's weird, dude. Like this, you can be changing this. It's 7 points. Ideally, if we manage to pull it off, then that's ideal. It's going to be good. Mostly this is going to be working in exploration. While fighting bosses, there are some bosses that are going to survive that one hit, and then they're going to die in the second. And I mean, the only one that I would advise for you to have as a must is the oppressive strength, because this prevents from you being staggered when you're doing martial arts. This is very useful while playing an exploration. Then again, while fighting bosses, you're using your living artifact, so you're not really being interrupted at all. So yeah, all of this is weird. You know, it's weird. You can tweak this around. It's not going to alter the actual skeleton or the base of the build. Guardian. There's not much to say in here. We're using Kusanagi. Kusanagi is going to increase our martial arts damage by 9%, and it's also going to increase the martial arts proficiency damage by 10%. So ideally, this is just a whole bunch of damage for ourselves. And this is where it gets interesting. The management of our Omnyo Box, I think that this is going to be the most important part of the build, because this is where the variables are going to start making sense. Sometimes you're going to be using this, sometimes you're going to be using that. So for our young positions, I like to use, there's many melee and martial arts damage that you can be using, but I already have them here. Like for example, the melee damage critical is very useful, but I already have this here as a Carnage Talisman. If you can get a copy of this one, that's pretty nice. But also the Infernal Oni's talismans are very good because this increase the fire damage. Our living artifact is going to be dealing fire damage. This is going to be cumulative 8.8% more damage towards our fire damage. So it's always really nice. Now, what's going to be changing depending on what is it that you're doing out there. While exploration, it's going to be this. Because while exploration, you won't be using one elemental talisman. Ideally, fire, because we're leveling our fire damage, and that fire talisman is going to be a percentage based on the maximum amount of damage that you're dealing with your weapon as a base. Now, when you're fighting something that it is going to have a second phase, there's a couple of things that we're not going to be able to use here. Like for example, you don't want to die, you don't want to shoot yourself in the leg before you actually start the second fight. Usually the second fight is the most dangerous one of them all. So the ones that you shouldn't be using when you're fighting those situations should be the Carnage Talisman. This could work. I mean, this is, I'll leave this up to your discretion, but the ones that you shouldn't really at all be using, that you should be saving, it's going to be the Last Stand Talisman. This is going to reduce your life to 30%, making you enter into critical state. You're not going to be able to heal, but your damage is going to be boosted by a whole bunch. I'd say that you still shouldn't be using the Carnage Talisman, so these are the two talismans that you should be saving for the second phase of the fight. On the first phase, you're going to be using the Soul Purge Talisman. This lasts for an insane amount. It lasts for quite a while. The ones that you should be using for debuffing the enemy, and you have several of these guys here, is the Weakness Talismans and the Slots Talismans. These should always be active, they should always be prepared to be used. Now, when you're ready to fight the boss, you're going to be changing the Elemental Talisman that you're using for exploration for the Power Talisman, but this is the one that you should be using last. While we do have a hefty amount of preparable ones for these guys, it lasts almost nothing, so you should be using just this when you're ready to do that final one-shot attack. And ideally, that's how things should be working here. As for the clans that you should be using, there's several that work well in here. I'd say that the Takeda one is ideally, this would be the strongest choice, because this gives you melee damage 12% versus an unscathed enemy, meaning that an enemy that has not received damage. So this is flat 12% more damage for you to be able to one-shot what is it that you have in front of you, but also it increases your fire damage by 8%, which benefits our living artifact that we're mostly going to be using all of the time. But you also have this attack, which is going to increase the high stance martial arts damage without having any kind of conditions. So this is always flat 9% high stance martial arts damage, and we're using high stance. And then finally, the most damaging of them all, I'd say, is Watanabe, because it's 14.4% versus an attacking enemy. And what do you know? Like, the natural state of the enemies is to attack you. So this is the highest flat damage that you can get. But either, like, this is just for comfort, and these two guys right in here, they deal more damage. But there are certain conditions that more than likely are always going to be there. So up to your personal preference, whichever one that you would like to choose from here. So for the martial arts, we're using the Sword of Meditation. This is our one-shotter, and this is what we're preparing for us to deal as much damage as we can possibly do. The more that you hold this attack, the more damage that you're going to be dealing, but you can also release it if you feel that you want to kill something before they deal enough damage to you. However, while I do have the gameplay on exploration for you here, this is New Game Plus, we are actually withstanding the heaviest damage, which is from the statues, that an enemy is going to be dealing you while exploration, and you're still going to be able to shrug it off and one-shot the enemies that you have in front of you. and that's ideally how this should be working while exploration. Like I mentioned, sometimes you're going to be changing stuff depending on what is it that you're fighting. If it has several phases, you want to be resistant enough to be able to deal with the first phase while saving all of the resources for the second phase so that you can deal with that second phase of the enemy more efficiently. So while it is dependent on certain variables, it's a very, very strong, powerful build that basically trivializes the endgame, and it's been lots of fun. Anyways, if you like the content, like and super appreciated. No, I told you today you're a gorgeous, beautiful person. You didn't, you're a gorgeous, beautiful, beautiful person. Subscribe to the channel, join the Discord, have a beautiful thing, bye.